All right. So, obviously, the largest story of the moment right now is Trump withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Accords. Not a treaty.
Not a treaty. Right. So, we didn't know that was going to be the biggest story. You could argue if that's the biggest story or not, because Kathy Griffin said some stuff, but we'll get into that later.
Right.
So, but yeah, obviously that was the biggest thing as far as American policy and whatnot goes
Right.
for the week. So I know that you've got some stuff to read about it, and we'll just go through whether or not we'll try to break down the agreement and kind of, because there's a lot of back and forth here on whether liberals tend to go this was a horrible and this
They
was
didn't
a
just
horrible
say
thing.
it was horrible. They were, like, prophesizing doomsday.
Your babies are gonna die. Like in a year, the world's gonna be a desert, and
Right.
Like,
I saw a lot of that going on, which I had a lot of problems with.
Republicans think it's the greatest thing, the shittiest deal of all time. So
And I didn't really see that either. That was the thing that kind of surprised me is Republicans, I thought, took a pretty relaxed tone with it. Like, there was a lot of Republicans that came out against the thing to come out of it.
I don't know. You must not be a Fox watcher.
I'm not a Fox watcher.
But Fox and Friends, not the show. I don't know. I don't watch that garbage. I don't like you, Steve Ducey.
I don't even know who that is.
But they were parading in the streets, the figurative streets.
Yeah.
With their figurative parade. So anyway, but a lot of back and forth, and I think a lot of people don't know what the hell is in the Paris Accord. I know that
Not a whole lot.
I know that I didn't. So let's go ahead and we'll give you a minute, and you can go ahead and
So first off, I wanted to set it up as I keep seeing that it's a treaty, and people keep mistakenly calling it a treaty, and it's not. And there's a very, very specific reason why it's not. Mainly because the president does not have that power. He
Right.
can't do that. So, and I've been arguing with people online about this because they don't do it. Apparently, they don't read the Constitution, of which I have a pocket Constitution. So you can borrow my copy. In my copy, yeah, it's a con swipe right there. In it, it states, Article 2, Section 2, he shall have power.
Literally, other than other than Mr.
Bottle.
Khan, only a Republican would whip out his pocket Constitution.
Yeah, liberals have to jump cheering for me now. Yay, he's the greatest. Says he
Hold
shall
on,
have
where's
power.
my Bible?
Right. He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. So obviously that didn't
I
happen.
think they should go to 51 votes.
It's going to have to, because I think everything should go to 51 votes in
Bullshit.
the immediate future, because it's just not going to work.
Nope.
You're basically saying that, no, nothing's going to happen now, because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the Senate doesn't agree with anything that the other side has to say who isn't in power.
I'm sure I'm sure that you would have felt exactly the same under Barack Obama.
I did. I kept saying, if you recall, quite often I would say, I don't know if Trump's going to win, and if so, I hope that Hillary Clinton wins and takes all of the Senate. And
I know that about Hillary Clinton. I don't know that about Barack Obama. I don't think you were there yet.
Yeah, at the same time, I kept chastising the Tea Party for not doing their jobs.
Yeah.
So, we got to do our jobs, folks. So, first off, it's an agreement. Second off, this agreement, in my opinion, sucks. It basically amounts to a pinky promise. There's nothing in place that says that you have to actually do what you say you're going to do.
Well,
So,
that's the problem with the agreement, is that there is nothing behind. I mean, there's little
some financial binding
Yeah.
things, typically mostly for the United States, saying that for some reason Barack Obama showed up and was like, "Hey, you guys want all our money? We just got too much money," and then.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how it went.
That's what it seems like. There's a lot of agreements where it seems that was his general thinking. So those things are binding, but actually reducing your emissions, there's nothing in place that says you have to do that.
And each country set their own regulations on that.
And let's look at what they set it at. There's a lot of zeros here. So,
yeah, there is a lot of zeros there.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The biggest, I guess, carbon emitters. You're going to obviously have the United States. You have China. Then you have India. You've got Canada. I think I'm forgetting another one. But basically, those are the big...
Russia?
Russia's, yeah, they're up there, but they're not huge. let's see. I think I might have a graphic here, which I will be putting into. Here we go. Emissions from countries. China emits 30% as of 2014. So this could have changed, but I don't think it would change that much, depending on trends. China emits 30% of all CO2 emissions. United States does half of that, with 15%. The EU, which is obviously quite a few different countries, 9%. You've got India at 7%, Russia at 5%, and Japan at 4%, which is pretty massive since Japan is such a small island.
Right.
Like, it's just not that very big of a country, but they're still up there. So that's basically the people who are doing it. So let's see where they set themselves for. So the United States decided that it would be a really good idea if we cut our carbon emissions by close to 18%. Like I said, if you notice, most of these countries aren't. But it does need to be said
Well, most of these countries aren't as big either.
No, they're not.
I mean,
now, Russia said that they're going to set theirs at about 7%, which is about as much as
It's higher than what
doing.
they're putting
Yeah.
in.
So that and they actually have been trying to pull in a bunch of money through their natural gas reserves that they've started to tap into due to fracking. So that's commendable for Russia to do that. Let's see.
We still don't like you, Putin.
Let's see where India is setting it at 4%, which is about on target of what they do. China did the most. They came out and said that they were going to reduce theirs by 20%.
Okay.
And before we start praising China for this, there's a very specific reason. And for that, you have to go into what is everyone's exports. America's exports, the number one export is refined petroleum. So we're basically saying that we're going to cut our biggest moneymaker, which I don't think is a good idea. China has come out and said we're going to cut emissions, which they have to. They're all dying. There's a thing called ridiculous smog going on there. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is that China owns the solar market. So they're going to love this agreement. This agreement basically says, hey, everyone, we're going to stop using fossil fuels and we're going to switch over to alternative energies, of which solar is the biggest one. So with this agreement, they plan to make quite a bit of money, which, of course, they need to.
Right.
So that's kind of important to point out.
That's fine to point out, but when you're looking at, does that matter? Isn't that kind of... I know that because the argument here is that it's a bad deal for the United States, and this is why it's a bad deal for the United States. But up until a couple decades ago, the United States was the number one polluter of the world. China has now overtaken us.
We're a large country with high energy needs.
Right. And the rest of the world is moving to solar, and we will eventually move to solar as well.
Not as quickly as you think.
China, no, I get that. China is primed for it, kind of our bad for sticking with coal for so long. Now we're going to...
No.
Go on.
First off, the thing that people need to realize is that the photovoltaic cells are not nearly as efficient as liberals would want you to think they are. Are they an emerging market? Yes, they are. Are they getting better and better every year? Yes, they are. They're nowhere near where they need to be. So right now,
then they shouldn't stand to make so much money.
Well, they are, because, like I said, the whole thing about the markets is you need to let the markets do their job. This is why if you start meddling
So if it's a bad product, like you just claimed, then the markets will act accordingly.
Which is why solar is only 3% right now globally. It's because it doesn't meet energy needs.
Right.
So when you so let's just take America into it. I know everyone says that everyone should be installing solar cells. Here's the deal. When it comes to these solar cells, they're expensive. So on average, anywhere you look at it, to install to meet one household's needs of energy, you are looking at installing anywhere. I think the average they came up with was about $20,000.
Okay.
To install these into a home, and then once they're installed, you would get average savings of about $1,000 of energy savings. Well, that takes 20 years to make your money back before you actually turn a profit off of these solar cells, of which case most people don't stay in their homes that long. Now, we could argue does it increase property values in some places? Yeah. In California, it does quite a bit.
But if they're not reasonably priced, right,
It's not that they're not reasonably priced. It's just they're not efficient enough, and it costs too much to produce.
So
at the
then,
moment.
how is your argument that China stands to make a bunch of money off of them? Because if they're a bad product, who's buying that?
Because it's an improving product.
Okay.
So this isn't
so
the
then
right
shouldn't
time.
we jump on that?
How would we?
Shouldn't we
wouldn't be jumping on anything.
Shouldn't we make a better product than them, and then force the market to act accordingly?
You can't. First off, you can't force the market to do anything. We tried that with Solyndra. The problem is that the production cost in America will never ever will be able to compete with China. It's not possible because they pay their people 35 cents an hour and we pay ours. People want $15 to flip a burger in America.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. This is a global market. This is a global commodity. And we are just going to lose. We already dumped $800 billion
So then,
into
but
it,
then
and we
you're
lost.
you're waving the flag already. Like, it's over.
It is effectively at the moment.
We
it is
should
over.
just buy Chinese solar.
We're gonna have to. There's
Okay.
really no other way. If you want solar, it's like the people at my work. Whenever we sell a product and they go, "Is this overseas?" Yes. Well, how much for the American
So then,
version?
how
Twice as much
so
money.
then how by pulling out of the Paris Agreement are we stopping the bleeding there? Like, how are we changing the?
first off, there's no-
how are we changing the end result? We're not.
No, you have to. Like I said, you have to let the markets do their job. So what this accord basically did is it tried to take a jump into the market and switch it into something they want. They want solar cells and green energy to be the number one source of energy. The problem with that is that it isn't, and it doesn't produce enough energy right now.
But we know that it will, and
So let's do that 10 years from now. There's no reason to do this right now. All this does is hurt our interest.
so all we're doing is kicking the can. That's all
No,
you're
that's
saying.
not even close to it. You have to wait. Just like I bought. Anyone who doesn't know, I bought a 4K TV. I bought it when it was basically brand new. Mm-hmm. And guess how much I paid? $2,000 for my TV. A few months down the road, I saw the same TV at Walmart for $800.
Right.
That was a bad choice for me to buy it then. If you
Bad
just
deal.
wait, yeah, bad deal. If you just wait, then the market fixes itself. New innovations happen. Things become cheaper to manufacture, and now it doesn't cost as much. And if they can produce more energy. Right now, they produce about half the energy.
But
we would
either
need.
way, so if we're waiting 10 years until the market fixes itself, then we still pay all our money to China
Yeah.
for the.
China is
so
going to
we're
owe-
literally kicking the can. Like
No,
at
it's
the
not
end of
kicking the
at the end of the scenario, China gets the United States money no matter what because
Yeah.
they will be the ones developing the product.
Exactly. So yeah, you can look at it that way, but the more logical way to look at it is to say, if we pay them more money
And
now,
in 10 years, when it is cheaper, now nobody's buying our export because everybody's buying from China.
we have to wean it off. So basically, what we're doing now is castrating our biggest export so that they buy more expensive Chinese products
So
right now.
then,
That doesn't make sense.
So then, probably, what we would do in the case of my scenario, your scenario, where 10 years from now, the entire world, including us, is buying the new hot commodity solar power. Now we're the only ones probably that won't buy solar power because we've got all this oil or this coal.
No, we absolutely
Let's go
will.
ahead and burn it, being the only country left to pollute the environment.
That's
Now
not,
carbon emissions are gone in your scenario, except for from the United States.
They're not, and that's the thing that you got to remember is that when it comes to these solar cells, people are going to buy them when it makes sense to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these people, the liberals that scream and shout, guess what they're not doing? Buying solar cells because
Right.
it costs $20,000 to do it.
Right, I get
so
that.
if you wait a little bit, the point I'm trying to make here with this
you
agreement
wait
is that
a little
we
bit-
don't need to do this right now.
Right, but you still get screwed in the end.
No, you don't. You pay less money, and you don't cut your major export out.
Okay,
You don't get screwed.
but at the end of it, your major export is obsolete.
Yeah, you obviously have to switch over and start doing other things, but we need time to do that. And the market will allow ourselves to do that. When we see where trends are going, maybe something else comes out and it's way better than solar and we didn't see it. And now we've just already castrated our biggest export and we've invested in other people's solar grids and there's a new thing that comes out that's better. It doesn't make sense to do this right now.
I
Because
wouldn't argue that it does. Up until this week, the Paris Agreement was just a term to me.
Right.
Like I had never looked at this or thought about this. Because here we go on my very unpopular view of climate change.
Oh my God.
I look at it two ways, right? Like it's real. I believe that it's real.
It is
and
real.
I don't think that I think we should be at a point where we don't have to say, I believe that it's
Right.
real. Like,
it's just not
real.
as dire as people are pretending it is.
Well, and maybe it is. I don't know. But what I will say is, like, I've seen climate change in my life. We live in St. Louis. When I was a kid, it snowed on my birthday in the middle of November, and it snowed until, like, April 1st every single year. I don't know when the last time I saw snow was.
It hasn't been snowing here lately. And
for years.
That's more of a that's more of a specific your own thing. Let's
Right.
look at the actual
So, but
temperature. That's kind of more of a indicator.
Well, what I'm saying though is that, like, I believe that it can happen quickly in some instances, but I also believe that before, like, it's going to be 1,000 years, a couple thousand years, many thousands of years before the Earth is a desert wasteland.
So here are the projections
so
here.
My view is that we should do things to keep the environment great for the future. But if you throw my grandkids or my ancestors at me, I'm not going to know them. So I will have died in a world that had water and grass, and like, I don't care. Like, I don't know. So this is why I don't look into things like the Paris Accords, because if you tell me the world's going to catch on fire, I believe you, but I'll be gone.
Right.
So,
well, it's important to understand that these projections, just much like with anything, when you're projecting hundreds of years into the future, you're always going to be wrong. And first off, when they say that there are widespread consensus by scientists that this is happening, there are, but there's very little consensus on how much. So take a look at this. We got a chart here that I'm going to be throwing into the video when I edit it. So this is basically from 1900. You know, obviously, the Industrial Revolution's been going on, and this is when we start doing some locomotives are shooting their stuff up to about here. So we've raised it by about 1.5 degrees, and this is Fahrenheit. Someone has decided that we're going to shoot it up by 12 degrees in the next 100 years. Most people aren't thinking that. Most people are more around like 4 degrees, and this 4 degrees Fahrenheit comes into about, I don't know, like 2.5 degrees Celsius or something like that.
Okay.
Is it bad? Yes. Is it dire? No. And and that's over the next 100 years, which typically is going to be wrong because, A, we're cutting emissions. We've already been cutting emissions for the past, 10 years or so.
Right.
And all these other countries have been cutting emissions. So this probably isn't going to happen. If we're saying CO2, and with new technological advances, they're doing things that are taking ozone or the CO2 out of the atmosphere and replacing it with other things. So whenever I see people running around with their hair on fire over this accord, I sit there and I feel like they don't actually know what the projections are.
Right.
We're not going to die tomorrow.
Yeah, no.
Our kids aren't going to die tomorrow.
No, I don't.
15 years, it'll be fine.
I don't think they are, but I do think that, I think in a lot of ways, pulling out of the Accord is more symbolic than it is anything. There was nothing that really binded us to meeting anything anyway. And I do trust Donald Trump when he says that, like, we're still going to continue to cut emissions and we're still going to. Now, what I worry about,
I semi-trust that.
Man.
He's rolling back a lot of regulations. And I'm okay with rolling back regulations, but
you're talking to Brandon Condit. Like, I don't fully trust Trump on anything.
I saw that Trump sticker on your car.
You put it on my car. But what I will say is, like, I believe that after Trump, like, we will.
Yeah,
I believe
it was 4 years, guys. Like,
I actually believe that after Trump, we'll be right back in it. But I think that whether it's a Democrat or Republican, like, I think we'll be right back in it.
Right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't happy this week. I don't know if you noticed.
He's not a conservative.
But what I will say, though, is I do think that it's more of a symbolic thing for the world, as a message to the world, as far as how Trump was thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I also think that it was a play to his base, because it was something that was talked about a lot in the campaign.
Because Trump, that it seems like if he can be convinced otherwise, he'll go against it. And he'll go, he does do a lot of the things that he promised to do because he actually believes them.
Yeah, I think he does a lot of things, though.
I think that he looked at this with sober eyes and said, this isn't a good deal. This doesn't help America. Even if every country followed exactly what they said they were going to do, they've said that we needed to reduce at least 3 degrees Celsius over the next 50 years or 100 years, whatever it was. And this agreement, if everyone followed it, would only reduce it by 1.5. So we're already, if everyone did what they were supposed to do, we already wouldn't be doing enough.
I do think, though,
and it hurts our economy.
I do think, though, that whether or not his base was all that was on his mind, or if he actually thinks of this as a bad deal, which it very well could be, depending on who you are and what you're... Because I don't think you're going to get the two sides. I kind of am the anomaly to the situation here, because I don't side with liberals or conservatives on this, because climate change is just not my, it's not my number one concern. I don't think that it's, I get it, it's real, and that's bad, and we should do what we need to do to curb it.
Now, solar is only being used by 0.33% of the world.
Okay.
Trying to switch over to it doesn't make sense.
No.
Here's what people are actually using. Almost 33% of petroleum, which is our biggest export.
Mm-hmm.
Coal, 30%, which again we are doing. Obviously, that's being taken over a little bit by natural gas, which is an emerging market.
Right.
But still 23%. And the reason for that is because solar, nuclear, wind, all of these things don't produce enough energy. They're way more expensive, and they don't produce enough. We have got to wait on this.
But we're talking about not waiting long. It's not long.
10 years is all it would take.
Right.
And I think that
so
would be...
coal miners just know that, I'm sorry to be the bad guy here, and I know why you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, but your job is going away anyway.
It is, yeah. That's just and plus, like I said, with these reserves, we only have a limited amount of them.
I think I don't think all of the left, because there is, I think there's we talk about it a lot. There's the vocal minority on both sides. That's your caricature of your crazy right guy, the redneck bigot who just you know the guy, and then
I've met a few of them.
And then the guy on the extreme left who burns down colleges because he can't handle a different point of view. We know both of these guys, but I do think that that a lot of us in the middle who are looking at the numbers and looking at the way that the markets are going, those guys that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton are going to lose their jobs anyway. So it's time for us to figure out a new market, whether it's solar or because at the end of the day, the world is going to, whether it's 0.33?
Yeah.
Which is a small percentage of the world.
Right.
I get it.
And like I said, there's a reason.
And I do agree with your scenario that in the future, we're going to have to figure something else out at that point.
Here's the thing, though. We don't actually have... And my argument is that we don't have to figure anything else out. We know what it is. Solar, in my opinion, is going to be the energy source of the future. Just not now. It doesn't make sense. Like Elon Musk. Obviously, liberals god, business god for some reason. Even though all of his products, they're good products.
I like Warren Buffett. He invested in ketchup. Anybody that invests in ketchup, right? That was just awesome.
Right. Well, they're freaking out because he was trying to convince Trump to stay in this agreement, and then of course he left because Trump didn't. Fucking duh. He owns a bunch of solar companies, so of course he wants people to move into solar companies.
Right. You shouldn't be shocked that Al Gore is upset. That's all I'm saying. So don't be upset.
But if anyone's been paying attention to Elon Musk, his big new product is solar panels that look like shingles. And so because that's one of the big things they say people don't buy solar cells for is mostly because A, the price, and B, because they're ugly.
Yeah.
And they want them to look like shingles, and these are more durable. Here's the problem. To install it on an average-sized medium house, $65,000. You don't have the money to do it. No one has the money to do this. So it's really nice to sit there and say that. Well, guess what? In 10 years from now, it might be $20,000.
I mean, unless...
And that's an American-made thing, so there's a difference. Look,
the only way that I can see that system even working is developers would have to be developing with them already in neighborhoods, and then that $65,000 is worked into the mortgage.
Well, here's the thing that really doesn't make any damn sense.
I mean,
the federal government subsidizes people who buy solar cells right now. So the government is paying taxpayer money to people to not use our main source of energy that we're producing. It doesn't make sense, and to buy from China. all of this doesn't make sense. That's why whenever we talked about Barack Obama and him lacking business and economic sense, this is what we're talking about.
Right.
There's an idea that's a good idea. It's just not the right time.
No, it
for
is still, though, it still can be very true. I think liberals have to wait a little bit, but I think that it can be very true that yes, it's a bad deal for the United States, and yeah, it was maybe it was going to hurt us, and it was better that we weren't a part of it than if we were. But it can also be true that it's a bad foreign policy decision, and it just depends on how the rest, because it seems to have pissed off pretty much everybody else.
Well, imagine that they're not producing oil,
right?
And it also Barack Obama said we were going to subsidize their energy grid.
But it is right. So
of course they're mad that we're not doing it.
Okay,
but again, I'd rather not get butt fucked. So let's just do that.
But if we end up going down that road anyway. As a result, if people stop, people can hurt us more than we think. It's as simple as, guess what? You have to fly over Italy to get to the Middle East. If somebody in Italy goes, you can't anymore. All right, now we have to figure some stuff out.
Then we invade Italy.
Right. Coming for you,
Had
Pope.
your time.
Because Pope rules Italy, right? Isn't that the way it goes?
And I want to make a correction. We commented the last time on the Pope holding their hand. That was fake. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I figured it was.
I thought that too, but then we commented like it was real. Apparently that was a skit or something.
No,
sorry guys, we totally just...
The other thing that was great about the last episode, while we're making corrections, is that we did our whole damn bit on Joe Lieberman and his FBI, blah, 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 blah. And then because that was something that I had wanted to talk about the week before, and we missed it, and I was like, well, we'll have to get it on this episode. So we go through that whole 7-minute bit about Joe Lieberman, get done with the episode, I go to edit and source it, and as soon as I pull up my article, right next to it is an article that's removed himself from consideration 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
We let you straight twice on that one.
Right. So my bad.
Going back to the Paris Accords, I think that bottom line, first off, it's symbolic. It already doesn't do enough. It doesn't do what it needs to do. No one is supposed to actually... No one's held to actually do it.
Right, which I think...
We're supposed to spend money on other people's energy grids and cut
if people
our biggest export.
If people were held to do it, then that would make it a treaty, correct?
Yeah, that would make it a treaty, and it would have to go through the Senate.
Through Congress, right.
And I guarantee you no one's agreeing on that because the Senate doesn't agree on anything.
Right. No.
So again, we're just going to have to wait. I am a big environmentalist. I believe in protecting the environment.
As stated before, I'm not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I am, but
I believe in protecting the environment.
To a bit. To a point.
I don't believe in just taking positions because, you've heard me say many times before, I don't give a shit about principles. To me, timing is everything. Yeah. Timing supersedes
He's not the Rob
principles.
Stark of this podcast.
No, fuck that. But when someone stands up, it's like the captain going down with the ship. If you know, and there's a lifeboat right there, you just let yourself die on principle, you're a fucking idiot. Mm-hmm. So with this thing, we know it's going to hurt our economy. It doesn't do what it needs to do. The technology isn't there yet. Solar energy will be the energy of the future. Unfortunately, China owns that market. So there's nothing we can really do about that. We've already tried to do something about that. But to hurt our economy and to subsidize other people's energy grids now, whenever the technology is so much more expensive than it will be in 10 years, doesn't make sense. And I'm glad that he pulled out of it.
So, though, he needs to, supplement it with, what it sounds like to me, he doesn't need to supplement this agreement with this next bit, but we need an infrastructure bill, because in the future, when China does own the energy market, we have very little left as far as industry to work with, and and we need to invest in marijuana. That's the next one.
That's right.
No, don't, because I want to do it first.
Starting from the ground up.
Right.
No, but they're going to have to do that. And that, again, when it comes to marijuana, that's another big, massive thing that has multiple uses for it.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense that we're not doing it.
Right. But we will need an infrastructure bill, because we will need an industry.
That'll come next. After the tax reform and the budget, I think that the infrastructure bill, because that's something Bernie Sanders has wanted very much. That's something Democrats agree on. That's something I think they should have led with that, really, because that was something that everyone agreed on, and it probably would have started us off on a better foot than healthcare. The fuck are you thinking?
How did they? Oh, we've said it so many times, but like, how do you screw that up? Like, it was the hardest thing. We've said 100 times Barack Obama shouldn't have started with that because, duh, you don't start with the most controversial, hardest thing to like. This
hey, let's come up with a bad plan and then let's do that.
I've been trying to get this thing fixed since like the 70s, and you're like, this is my #1 priority, which is good that it was a priority, but it's a second-term priority.
Right.
Like, I'm just saying, like, politically, it is a second-term priority.
Call it like you see 'em.
Especially if you're not successful at it like Barack Obama was, and if you get 2 years into this process and now you're in the middle of an election and then you're out, what the hell? Like, your entire presidency was spent on something that's now not going to get done. And
and that's exactly what happened.
And Republicans caused it to not.
Yeah,
they didn't cause it to not be successful, but like, they were going to get rid of it for 7 years and then came in and didn't think that, like, maybe
shit, do we need a plan?
we should break the ice a little bit. Like, we have the government now. We should break the ice.
Right.
And we should be like, hey, infrastructure, this makes everybody happy. Nah, let's do the thing that's going to polarize both sides.
Right.
So
I think we can wrap this up here. I think that when it comes to the Paris Accord agreement, I think it was a bad agreement to begin with. I think that it's a symbolic agreement that doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's a wishful thinking, and on top of it, it's a pinky promise with literally nothing enforcing it. So already it's bad. I think for America, it was an even worse deal because obviously we're subsidizing other people's energy grids and we're hurting our biggest export for no damn reason.
I think it's still too early, though, I honestly not comfortable saying it was bad or a good deal because I think that only time will tell. If pulling out of it fucks us more than staying in it would have, then it was a good deal, and it was a bad idea to get out of it.
I'll put it this way: anytime you come up and are like, "Hey, can I buy your lunch? Can I buy your dinner? Hey, you want $20?" and then you stop doing that, you're gonna piss that other person off because they want you to pay for their shit.
Right.
But can you do that long term? No, and I think that it came down to it.
Basically, Republicans call it $100 billion bad deal, and what I'm saying is that if pulling out of it costs us more than $100 billion worth of troubles, then it was a good deal, good enough.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Personally, obviously, I don't know, but I don't think that it's.
I also think too that, like, and I know
pulling out.
I'm not trying to make light of $100 million or $100 billion, but in the grand scheme of the amount of money that countries spend on things, that's like a day of sitting in the Middle East, right? So,
well, if the wall is only $30 billion, then we can just build the wall because it doesn't do anything either.
The beginning of the wall project is $30 billion.
Even if it gets up to $100 billion.
$500 billion.
It's the same thing.
And I'm saying that, like...
I'm not for the wall if everyone hasn't been watching before.
Yes, he is.
I think that it's worthless.
He said he would sponsor it, and he wants Nabisco right there with him.
Nabisco,
I heard him say it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good place to end it. I personally would like. We will see what pulling out of it does,
what ramifications are, and all of that.
But I do agree with you that, like, there are a lot of bad pieces to it. I just don't know. I still look at it kind of as, all right, but what do we do next? Because all we've done, like, yeah, we're sustaining ourselves for 10 or 15 or 20 years, but then, like, after that, hopefully we've done something with infrastructure, because we could be looking back in 20 years going, well, if we would have started investing in solar, then maybe.
Again,
I don't know.
It's the global economy. We're never going to be able to compete with China on this, and they already own it. So they've already got all of the infrastructure in place to produce these solar cells. We tried it. It didn't work. So we're not winning on this one. Like, I feel like that unless we somehow innovate so much to where, you know, we produce solar cells that do 8 times the energy output, and so people are willing to buy it at this slightly increased cost, then that's the only way we would actually be able to be in the game. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
But
yeah, I don't know.
See.
We'll see. So.
Alrighty.
All right.